a gun in the face.
Then all of a sudden, they all kind of lined up. They pointed their guns at me. And this is the point where I thought, I'm going to die today.
Started 2 years of horror for an American in Venezuela.
They said, you need to give us your phone and get ready because you're coming with us.
I'm Becky Bruce, and I spent a year researching and piecing together Josh and Tammy Holt's story about their ordeal in a notorious prison.
That's when everything started to turn bad. We had another pound on the door. Boom, boom, boom. And there was the police once again.
You can binge all of the episodes of Hope in Darkness on kslpodcasts.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
In today's episode of Project Recovery,
it's something I would never wish upon my worst enemy because it's so hard. I want to help others, because I don't want to be ashamed anymore of my story.
Make sure you listen to the end. Find us on Facebook at Project Recovery. We'll have that and much more coming up. Hey, welcome to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, but more importantly, it's about recovery. And it's brought to you at our friends at useonlyasdirected.org. They got a three-part solution, Dr. Matt. It's speak out, opt out, and of course, throw out. And without them, we couldn't do this podcast weekly. And speaking of this podcast, we're going to introduce our guest in just a second. And I'm really excited about this episode because it kind of brings it full circle. But I'm out and about and I'm at the gym or I'm at the Kent's Market or wherever I'm at, people come up and I'm always surprised about who's listening to the podcast.
Yeah?
And
like give me an example.
So I was at the gym. I was working on the biceps. You know what I mean? Just staring in the mirror.
Your biceps?
My biceps,
okay.
yeah. Listening to Little Meatloaf. And this guy comes up. And now I used to get this all the time when I was on TV. People go, "Are you Casey Scott?" And I'd have a standard, I'd go, "Why, do I owe you money?" And that was kind of my way to break the ice so we could talk. But, so I haven't been in TV for 2 years after the mug shot. And so sometimes I go, "Did you see the mug shot?" And some people say yes and some people no. But this guy came up and he was just this nice gentleman. And he goes, "I just want to tell you that I really love your podcast."
Oh.
And so then I started to play the inquisitive game. Like, are you listening to it because you're an addict or do you know somebody, And he just goes, "I've got a son who's got a problem with pornography." Mm-hmm. And this podcast has been very instrumental in letting me see his side and also as a way to get resources and see what's out there. And
good.
And so, it was just
That's our goal, right?
That's it was
awesome.
way cool,
Yeah.
And he goes, "But I started listening to the podcast because I just wanted to see what the heck happened to you." I think there's a lot of people out there that are listening to this podcast who in some way, shape, or form know somebody who's battled with addiction.
Sure.
And this gives them some insight and lets them know that, they're not the only one like me sitting on the back deck drinking a 12-pack thinking he was broken.
Right. I've had a similar experience with people who, so I don't know for what reasons necessarily, but surprised me that this older person or this younger person might be listening to our podcast, Mm-hmm. And most of the time, in fact, maybe every time I've had a conversation with people who've come up to me and said they enjoy the podcast, it's the same sort of thing. They have some relationship in their life that's been touched by addiction, and this has given them some different perspectives, And I think one of the things that's really cool is it's a family disease, and so we need family support. And people who may not have had an addiction themselves have family members who do, and it's a great opportunity to hear other people's stories and like you said, find out about resources, because there really are a lot of great resources for families and friends of people who are the addict,
Now, you said a key word there that really piqued my interest, and it was perception. And, this podcast is my perception of my recovery. And this is kind of how I perceive it and what's going on. Now, we've had a lot of people on the podcast in the past that have told their side of the story and what they dealt with addiction, whether it was them in active addiction or loving a family member or a friend in addiction. And one of the most powerful episodes we've ever had is Shelly Smith's story.
Right. That was we've gotten so much social media feedback and otherwise a lot of downloads, but a lot of people just talking about her story. And I think it's because she did such a nice job of kind of just being genuine and telling her story.
And out of all the podcasts we've ever done, that one probably hit me closest to home because I was listening to her tell her story, and all I could see was my ex-wife. Mm-hmm. And all the stuff that I had put my family through my active addiction, and the turmoil and the damage that I had caused because of this. And so for the first time in a long time, I was almost speechless during
I know. I was just going to say that, you and I have been doing, TV and radio stuff for a long time together. And so, we kind of have it down, and I, we'll look at each other and kind of, share a thought sometimes during a show. And I kept looking over at you during her story, and you were like entranced, and I could tell sort of speechless, like not really, it was hitting you hard. And it's funny because the serious Casey Scott face doesn't come out very often.
No, and to be honest with you, I've toyed with the idea of having my ex-wife on the podcast.
I know, I want you to have her on.
And I've asked her, and I don't think she's ready.
Yeah, okay.
And maybe she'll never be ready, and that's okay.
That's fine.
I can tell you right now, my relationship with my ex-wife is wonderful. We talk openly weekly. We talk about our kids. We talk about life.
You guys do have a good post-marriage relationship.
And I'd never, I can tell you right now, when that divorce went down and we were walking through the house picking yours, mine, and I mean, that was ugly, and it was, and it was bitter, and it wasn't fun. And my kids didn't have a good time. I didn't have a good time. She didn't have a good time. And to where we are now is a blessing. But you sent me a text about 3 weeks ago, and you said, "Hey, Scott Dog," because that's what you call me when we're off air.
See money.
And I said, "What's up?" And you said, "Hey, Shelly's husband wants to come on the podcast."
Right.
And I went, whoa. And I think I remember exactly texting you back, this could be really good or this could be really bad.
Right. I was just hoping he wasn't mad at us.
Yeah, because once again, that's her story. And when Shelly came on, we said, tell your story through your eyes. And so we got to look.
But I think even a few times on that show, she said, well, I can't comment on that because that's Jason's part of the story. I don't know about that. And then she'd bring it back to herself. So she did a really good job of keeping it about her.
So I had you talk to Jason a little bit, and you thought that he was in a good place because that was one of our main concerns in the beginning.
Right.
Is this going to be a good thing for him? Because, Jason, you're here. Say hello.
Hello.
And you're new into recovery.
Yes.
How many days sober do you got?
8 months.
8 months, which congratulations, man.
Yeah, definitely.
I mean,
That's awesome.
I cheer for the people with 8 months just as much as I do for the guy with 1 day, and the same amount for the person with 10 years because I know what that battle's like. And so to 8 months, kudos, brother. That is cool.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
And so you talked to him and you said, let's bring him on.
Yeah.
And let's hear his side of the story.
I think it's a really unique opportunity. We've spent a lot of time, especially this last year on the show, talking about the family experience of addiction, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, if Jason really is interested in doing that, what a cool opportunity to have, first the wife and then the husband come in and tell their version, their side of the story, their perspective on the addiction process. And just having both points of view is such a neat opportunity. So I'm excited today.
So let's hear Jason's story. Jason, give us a little information about yourself.
So, yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me, number one. I'm here to rebuke everything Shelly said.
Well, this is going to be a short podcast.
Blame Casey.
Totally kidding. I'm here to get my stamp of approval, actually, on what she did. I thought she did a phenomenal job. And, I was like you, Casey. I was very somber that day. Because, as an addict or an alcoholic or what have you, the whole process, when you go through the process, you have to sit in things a lot. And, that's when I had to sit in it again. And it was hard to hear. I mean, I'm not going to lie to you. I mean, it's always hard to hear when you're, those stories because you don't want to hurt anybody. That was not your intention. As an alcoholic, I never wanted to hurt anybody. But she did a great job, and I was proud of her. I even told her that. But her story was real, raw, and it was a somber moment for me, but it was a good moment.
Now, was that some of the first times you ever heard her point of view or her talk so eloquently about addiction? Because I know when I was active in my addiction and battling it, and some of the same conversations you had with your wife, I had with my ex-wife, and I never really saw my ex-wife's side of the story. Because in my addiction, I used to tell her all the time, I go, what do you care?
Right.
I'm doing this to me. I'm not begging you to drink. I'm not doing anything. I'm just trying to figure me out. Why are you so mad at what I want to do with my body? And not until, 2 years plus sobriety under my belt that I was like, whoa, I was affecting everybody,
right?
Even to my kids, to my in-laws, to everybody. And so, to hear her say, I wanted my ex-wife to listen to that episode. I don't know if she has, but.
No, that's the thing. A lot of that I've forgotten. That's what it was. It was, because you forget a lot of things.
We have selective memory.
We do.
Yeah.
Because we're numbing out so much that we forget how bad it really was. And we minimize things. As an alcoholic or an addict, you minimize everything.
Oh, yeah.
It's not that bad. It wasn't that big of a deal. Why are you making such a big deal out of this? Well, to them, it was huge. It's a big deal. And for her and for my children, my family members, siblings, it's a big deal. But we minimize as addicts.
And in fact, one sort of a philosophy statement, perception determines reality. There's a lot of truth to that statement. Our perception of things absolutely determines the reality that we live in. And so you or any parent can have a certain behavior, and if you have 4 kids, there's 4 different perceptions of your behavior. So therefore, to some degree, 4 different realities. And so, some kids, depending on their personality, they may see your, acting out behavior as a parent as funny, or they may look at it and think nothing of it.
Right.
But for some of those kids or your spouse, it may hit them really deep and hard because of their perception of things. So, yeah, it's addicts definitely downplay and minimize their behavior. But once you get sober and realize everybody's perception has validity, and it was their reality more, their perception determined the reality more than maybe the actual behaviors you had.
Right.
All right, you're listening to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction, more importantly about recovery. What we're going to do is going to take a break right now. When we get back, it's Jason's story.
It's the story of an American held in a dark Venezuelan prison.
Then all of a sudden they all kind of lined up. They pointed their guns at me. And this is the point where I thought, I'm going to die today.
I'm Becky Bruce. I spent a year working on Hope in Darkness, which now has more than 2 million downloads. Find it on kslpodcast.com or wherever you listen to podcasts.
All right, Jason, so we talked a little bit about the whole podcast, your ex-wife coming on and telling her story and why you wanted to do this. So before we get to everything, how did it start, and could you remember how it began?
Yeah, it's a little fuzzy because of the fact that I don't know when it actually began to become a problem. I grew up, in a good family, grew up Mormon, or LDS, or whatever you want to call it, where drinking wasn't allowed. I was associated with people that drank. My mom's side of the family, my grandma, grandpa, uncles, they all drank. And so I was familiar with it. But yeah, I was a good kid. I was an athlete. I fiddled around with it in high school a little bit. Just some parties or just with some buddies, maybe a handful of times, but really didn't know what it was all about, really never really got drunk, I guess is what you could say. But I was always so focused on my athletics that I never really, it wasn't appealing to me because I always wanted to keep my body in the best shape possible so I could perform. So I grew up, through high school, had a good childhood. I went on a mission. LDS mission to New Zealand, did that, and it was a great experience. Learned Samoan, spoke the language there, and loved the people. The people were awesome. Came back, met my Shelly a couple years later. We dated for about 8 months and then got married. Married in the temple. Did the whole church thing, 100%. And Shelly's really the one that got me going on that, because I was more. You talk about being in the gray, Casey. I was always in the gray, man.
Yeah.
My life was never black and white. It was always gray. And Shelly's black and white. If we're going to do this, we're going to do this 100%. And so, we dug in and we did it 100%, with our marriage and the church. And so, she talked about this, but I was a LDS bishop. I did 5 years. I did 110%, and it was great. It was a great experience. I mean, I realized a lot of things about myself at that time. Anxiety started coming into my life really heavy.
For those of you who don't know, an LDS bishop is like a pastor or
leader of the congregation, right?
And for those who don't know more about that, you're often the one that when your flock or your community is in trouble, they come to with all their problems. I remember my ex-wife's father was a bishop, and I used to, hey, that's cool. And he goes, yeah, it's cool. But you also get a lot of insight of everybody in your neighborhood, and it's a pretty heavy job.
Yeah.
And a lot of times they're not equipped to be a therapist and everything that needs to be. And so you were probably dealing with a lot of stressful stuff at the time.
I was, and I was only 26, 27.
And that's fairly young to be
really
asked.
young.
And for the listeners, it's a volunteer position. They typically ask someone in the congregation who, they feel is a exemplary member of the church to be the bishop. And you can turn it down if you want. It's not a paying gig, but it is more than full time because, like you said, Casey, the members rely on the bishop a lot. And you said that as you were having people come into your office and talk to you about things, and just like a priest, there's confession and all of that. It started to make you feel anxious. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
So I got anxiety. I didn't know what anxiety was. I had no idea. I knew I'd experienced something similar to it in the past, but the night before my sustaining is, when they call, the whole ward members, vote with a raise of a hand that it's okay for you to be the bishop.
Mm-hmm.
So the night before, I had a full-on panic attack. I had no idea what it was. I thought I was dying. I thought
most people do when they have a panic attack. And
I would have been like, God, are you trying to tell me something?
Exactly.
I mean, but in honesty, you're like, hey, maybe.
I thought it was Satan.
Yeah,
because back then, it was God and Satan. And God and
those
Satan
symptoms
was
are
bad.
similar to heart attack symptoms. So
Right.
a lot of people who've had their first panic attack end up in the ER.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't end up there because I was like, I can't be weak, and I can't show this that I'm panicking or I'm having a full-on anxiety attack. So went through with it, and I didn't tell anybody that I was suffering from this anxiety.
And that kicked off more anxiety.
Yeah.
That's usually how it works,
Yeah.
is you have a panic attack, and then you're more susceptible to anxiety over time.
Right. And the problem is, or not the problem, but the issue there was I felt like I had to be perfect. Mm-hmm. As a
Everybody's
bishop.
watching you.
Everybody's watching me.
They picked me.
They picked me.
Not just a good example, but maybe a perfect example. Right.
Exactly. In which I
can't swear anymore.
I can't swear. You
Can't
can't
smack your kids in public.
Whoa, that escalated pretty quick, Matt.
Maybe Matt needs to talk.
We don't do that? No. Okay.
Wow.
So so I felt like I had to be perfect,
Yeah.
and that was a lot of pressure I was putting on myself. It wasn't until I was 2 years into this. It wasn't until I finally told Shelly, my ex-wife, that, hey, I'm really having some issues here. Like I can't sleep. Like, my diet's horrible. I'm stressing about this all the time. And so I finally went and got some help. I finally went to a therapist, really helped me. I mean, I'm pro-therapist because therapists really do help. So Matt,
I'm not paying him for that.
yeah.
No, I get it. Yeah.
You guys talked about that. About therapy.
A good therapist is worth its weight in gold.
It is, and he really helped me to realize that. Hey, he was an older gentleman that had been through all the callings, and he really helped me see the light of, hey, man, you're putting way too much pressure on yourself. Let's take a step back and let's just do this, but you don't have to be perfect in it, And so then I started to really enjoy what I was doing. I enjoyed the youth, man. I mean, that was awesome. That was one of the greatest things about being a bishop is you got to go to all the youth activities, go boating and camping and
all the fun stuff.
The fun stuff was the crap behind the door that, that I didn't like. I'm 27 years old and I'm giving marriage counseling. I mean, really? I don't know a dang thing about,
Sure.
I've only been married a few years.
That's like me giving driving advice.
Yeah, a little bit.
Probably not the guy you want to go to.
A list of do nots.
Yeah.
So anyway, I don't want to get stuck there because there's more to the story. But so that I served my 5 years. Was released. We went to Morgan. That's where
my
we met.
Hometown.
Yeah. I think that's where we met.
Yeah, and
a long time ago.
Yeah, I ran into you and Shelly there in church.
Yeah,
right. Yeah,
that's correct.
Yeah.
So, but then I really realized, hey, I don't want to be in leadership again in the church. I really don't. So I'm going to do everything possible not to get back there because that was, it was traumatizing for me.
And just for the listeners who may not know, I mean, if you've been a bishop, then you're likely to be called to other big callings, other leadership positions, which are very time-consuming and can also have similar stressors to them.
Right. Yeah. And so, anyway, I have nothing against the church or anything like that. Everybody's belief is different. And I'm an advocate of all beliefs. I mean, you believe the way you want to, and I'll support you with whatever. So anyway, so after that, then I started, we moved to St. George, and that's when it kind of, that's kind of when it really started.
She was kind of unclear of when it all started too. And
let me ask you this, do you remember after your mission, after being a missionary and getting married in the temple, do you remember the first time you took a drink?
Yeah, I never took a drink until, I don't remember the first time. That's the problem is, I think I was traveling for work. I think that's what it was. I was traveling for work and I was in a hotel by myself. And this is one of my triggers is being isolated alone. It's horrible for me. I'm a closet drinker. And so I remember thinking, I'm bored. I want to do something, I want to do something kind of crazy, So I went across the street, bought a case of beer, and drank it. Didn't really have any effects. Got up the next day, functioned, and no big deal. Just went on with life. And then never thought about it again, really, until, I started traveling some more, and traveling and isolation are the biggest triggers for me. So,
and knowing your triggers is extremely important.
Yes. Yeah. If you can recognize your triggers, that's a big help.
Yeah.
So I was going to Vegas, for work 3 days a week. I had to stay overnight.
Were you entertaining clients, or was it?
No, it's all private. Yeah, I was not entertaining. I was down gambling. I just at the slot machine or at the table or whatever, and they bring you drinks.
Yeah.
Well,
I know.
Yeah. So I would just drink, while I'm playing or whatever.
See, there's my anxiety, gambling.
Yeah.
I can't do it.
Yeah.
Too much anxiety.
You just described 10 years ago what a perfect night for me would be. I'm not lying. I was like, this is great. I sit at the table, and as long as I've got money on there, the drinks are free.
Exactly.
So you do whatever you could, But I can understand that. So you're just trying to kill time, not be stuck in your room and isolate.
Right.
And they're feeding you alcohol.
And every hotel you're in has a place to gamble.
That's right.
For those who don't know, and maybe some of our listeners don't, but that's kind of where they get you at casinos. Is as long as you got money on the table, the drinks are free, and they will come rapid.
Oh yeah,
because they know the drunker you get, the more loose you are with your money.
Yep.
And so, if you go in there, you'll never see a clock in a casino. You'll never see windows. You don't see daylight. You don't know what time it is. They pump oxygen in there and smell good, and you could be sitting next to a guy smoking a cigar and never even know it because they've got it down to a science. Yep. So they were almost, feeding your addiction and I not say creating it, but they weren't hurting it.
Right. Exactly. And so, so that's kind of where it started, I think. And it really didn't become a problem at the time. I remember a funny story about Vegas is that I was I had had a night and I stayed up late and I was gambling all night. And I can play tables for hours with $100. I mean, there was one time I lost a lot of money, and and after that I kind of quit. So,
Yeah.
But anyway, I woke up the next morning, and I'm supposed to be working like at 8:00, and it's like 11:00, man, because I have slept in. I'm hungover a little bit, and I come out, and my truck and trailer are gone, and I have a truck and I have a trailer full of product that I'm selling, and it's gone.
Uh-oh.
So I'm running around the parking lot. I'm like, where did I park that thing? Maybe I don't remember. Maybe I don't remember where I put it. And so I'm running around this parking lot, and it's gone. And so I got my truck and trailer stolen. So I had to make that phone call to Shelly. And of course, I'm hiding stuff because it's a secret. Or at least I thought it was a secret. We think we're getting away with a lot of stuff.
Yeah, we're not.
We're not, and
No.
people know, and she knew. And you guys talked about gaslighting, I used that, and I, it makes me feel horrible that I tried to make her feel like she was, crazy or out of her mind. Like, hey, what are you talking about? Why would I do that? Why would I drink? Or, why would I smell like alcohol? I don't do those things. You must just be, making things up in your head.
Crazy. I mean, that's
Yeah.
the word when you gaslight, you throw that word around a lot.
And that's a horrible thing to do to a human.
Mm-hmm.
And, if I could take that back, I would. I take a lot of things back, obviously. But anyway, it was gone. And I had to make that phone call to Shelly. And she's like, well, what are you doing going to it's 11:00. You're just noticing it now? And I'm like, oh, crap.
Busted.
I'm busted. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I think right then and there, that's kind of when things started to get worse, I guess.
You said something that I find interesting, Dr. Matt. You go, when did it become a problem? And there was this quote with Samuel Jackson, who's in recovery as well. And somebody asked him that too. They go, when did it become a problem? And he said, at the end. Mm-hmm. And that kind of reminds me of yours. I don't remember when it became a problem. Uh-huh. But what you didn't, maybe you do see it now, is that it was a progression.
Yeah.
You'd go down there and you would sit there, they'd feed you alcohol, and it wasn't that bad. And then,
Sam Jackson's, statement is actually one of perception, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like other people probably had a problem with him during the process. For him, it wasn't a problem until the end.
Yeah.
So that's the
Right.
difference, his perception and someone else's perception.
And that's what I'm getting at with him. It's like he doesn't know exactly when, but if you want to talk about when the first time you sat down at a blackjack machine and to where you got your truck stolen,
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure there was a problem somewhere in between, but it wasn't until the truck was gone that you
Right.
saw it being a problem.
Exactly. And it wasn't, and I feel like it wasn't till I finally figured it out. It was numbing me out. It was making me go, my brain shut off. And I could use it as a mechanism to shut off the brain. Because, as an anxious person, naturally, your brain is going 100 miles an hour, and you're just trying to shut that down.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that was one of the...
Well, and it's such a common story. Our mental health is so intimately associated with the development of addiction because so many people have a mental health issue like anxiety. And if you've never been anxious, and I don't know who you are if you've never been anxious, but if you've never really, anxiety is just such a miserable feeling. Mm-hmm. To have that feeling of always being on guard and feeling intense and having the heart palpitations and the worries, that you'll do anything after a while to just get rid of that feeling.
I just wanted to get out of my body.
Oh, yeah.
I remember when I got divorced and I was drinking a lot, I would stare in the mirror. I'd be in my car and I would turn the radio down and I would just scream, I hate my life. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And now looking back on it, I didn't realize how good I had it back then. I mean, I have it good now and I'm so much happier. But back then I was like, I didn't have a DUI. I had a great job. I had kids who loved me. Mm-hmm. But and that's exactly when you said numbing, that's exactly what I was doing. Right. I was just numbing feeling. I didn't want to feel anymore because I didn't want to sit there, like you said, and marinate in my own pain. And sometimes you need to. You
just want to turn it off.
Yeah, and that's what I was doing.
Yeah. And it's crazy, and we'll get to this later on, but today I don't take anything for anxiety. And I feel the better and the best I felt in my whole life. And I attribute it to exercise, to hiking, to being present is what it comes down to.
Yeah, and that's what's great is people, who are struggling with anxiety right now, it can get better. And it's usually a multitude of things happening consistently over time that really improves that nervous system and that anxiety in your life. But I'm glad to hear that you're feeling that way because that's the ultimate goal.
Right.
And sometimes we take the quick and easy route to numb ourselves out, and then that can hook us. And that's where alcohol or drugs, pornography, whatever it is, food, these things can hook a person and pull them into an addiction, which only makes the anxiety worse.
Right. Yeah, it just magnifies it.
Yeah.
Because all we're trying to do is distract our mind from what really is going on. And whether that's alcohol, drugs, food, pornography, like you said, it's something to distract us. And I think everybody has addiction somewhere along the way. It's just different. Some's more destructive. But I think there's help for everybody. And I'm an advocate of therapy because that's really helped me as well.
And that's what this podcast is all about. You're listening to Project Recovery. We're listening to Jason's story. We're going to find out more about his. If you remember, he just lost his truck. But we want to find out about the first time his wife bought him alcohol. That was an interesting comment. We'll find out more about that in just a second. Hey, welcome back to Project Recovery. I'm Casey Scott. Dr. Matt Woolley, clinical psychologist, is here as well. And our guest today is Jason Bush. How are you, man?
Good.
So when we had your ex-wife, Shelly Smith, on, and she told her story, I remember her telling us this story where when she found out you were drinking, she called her sister, and her sister says, be the cool wife. Mm-hmm. Go buy her some alcohol. So she talked to what a frightening moment that was to go to the liquor store and get you Goldschlager, if I believe it was.
Yes.
And came back and said, here you go.
Right.
And then within a day realized how much you drank of it and realized this wasn't going how she thought it was.
She didn't even really realize how much is too much until she had to keep calling her sister and kind of measuring your bottle, kind of like you did with your roommate in college who was drinking your milk. You
put the line there with the Sharpie.
Yeah, so that then, and of course to get around that, then you just drink it filled with water.
Yeah.
Right. But that's not what she was. Sorry, a little tangential.
No,
but she was pulling that trick on you, basically.
Yeah,
right?
and I had no idea. But I tricked her back.
So with apple juice or something?
Because water, because we're cunning. I'd leave a little bit in there and I'd fill some with water so it looked like it was still up. But yeah, she did that. It's kind of, we can laugh at it now, but then it was serious, because, that's a lot of alcohol, where you're going through a bottle, Goldschlager, I don't know how many ounces in it, but, if you're going through a bottle a day, there's an issue.
That's a lot. Did it escalate quickly? I mean, I'm kind of. How soon before you were drinking like a bottle a day?
Well, I wasn't drinking a bottle a day back then. Let me take that back. Okay. It was just more like, hey, I've gotten the green light. I'm just going to drink.
What did you think of
like a normal person?
Like your wife, who was very naive about alcohol, and she's this black and white, all or nothing kind of person. And then she comes and buys you alcohol. What was that like?
It was a little awkward. I was hesitant because I'm like, this is still not, you're going to try to control this some way or another. I still thought that in the back of my mind. And I knew, I don't know, in the back of my mind, I knew it wouldn't last. But, I was trying and for her, bravo for her for trying. But I was trying to be normal and quote unquote normal. What is normal?
You weren't drinking for fun necessarily, right?
Right.
But he said something. He goes, when she gave him the green light, I wanted to start drinking like I was normal. But the reality is your drinking was never normal.
Never. It was never a social setting. I was never around friends.
I get the sense that you were embarrassed.
I was ashamed. I didn't want people to know.
In fact, I remember when Shelly talked about this part of the story. Not only did she go to the store and buy the alcohol for you, but she said, well, let's just tell the kids. Let's just have it all out in the open. And your answer was?
No.
Why not?
Because I didn't want that image. I was still trying to protect my image. And, and I think during the process of the last 10 years, I've always tried to protect my image. And I was always trying to create this persona of everything is okay, everything's good. What people see is what they get. But in reality, it wasn't. And I think that's a real, it's not a good thing for anybody to try to keep up an image that's not real. And that's why I'm here today, is I want my story out there. I want to help others, because I don't want to be ashamed anymore of my story. Because, yeah, it sucks, and it's ugly, and it's something that I would never wish upon my worst enemy, because it's so hard, and you hurt so many people along the way. But that's why I'm here, is because I want people to know my story, because it's freeing. I want to be transparent about my life. I don't want my life to be a secret anymore. My life is not a secret. This is who I am. This is who I'm becoming. My life will always be in recovery. And I've made that life change. I've made that life switch. And I will never go back. I will always be in recovery the rest of my life. And that's my new normal. And that's okay.
That's a healthy perspective. I can tell just as you're talking about it how genuine you're feeling about this shift in your life, and just to support you in that. I mean, the reality is so many mental and emotional problems can be alleviated by just being honest, first with yourself about who you are and what your strengths and weaknesses are, and then with other people, especially the people that we're closest to in our lives. It's interesting to me, earlier in the show, you had mentioned you were a bishop for 2 whole years before you even told your wife about your anxiety.
Right.
And so that tells me that was part of your personality, was to hide and hold things back that seemed like weakness or problems.
Yep.
And to put forth this perception that you're large and in charge with everything and doing everything just perfectly. And that is not that's not a situation that's sustainable for us as humans, but so many people do it.
Right.
And maybe we all do it a little bit, but the more open and honest we are with ourselves, then the more we can be with other people. And then it is freeing, just as you were talking, you're doing some hand language.
Yeah.
I could just see it was like, you're just like, I want to get this off my chest.
Yeah. It's like it's a weight, and secrets make you sick. You hear that all the time in addiction. And it's true.
Recovery, I used to think there was so much, I was ashamed of my recovery. And I was ashamed that this happened to me, that I had to go through all this. But now it's a badge of honor. I mean, it really is. My kids are proud of me. My ex-wife's proud of me. My girlfriend's proud of me. My parents are. And, I used to think, man, I'm going to have to tell people that I'm an alcoholic. Now I get to tell people. Right. And I don't care what they say, because I'm not ashamed. I'm ashamed of things I did, and I'm sorry, and I'm remorseful. But I am proud of where I am and what I'm doing now.
What does it mean? So maybe both of you could answer this then. Once you make that shift from being ashamed that you have a problem with drinking to being proud of the fact that you can say you're an alcoholic in recovery, like what made that shift happen for both of you?
For me,
For you, it might have been forced on you a little bit because of the public image that you had. But even then, a lot of people you and I know, they'll get their mugshot out there, and they don't really change that much.
And I think it's going to go back to bring it full circle, what we talked about at the beginning of this podcast. It was perspective. Mm-hmm. It was so much of a different perspective. I figured I could go through life and focus on all the things that I'd messed up and screwed up and did wrong and feel sorry for myself. Or I can go through and look how far I've come and what I have the ability to do and focus my energy on that. And so it was perspective. Yep. I mean, I was like, hey, I'm not that guy. Was I that guy? Yes. Did I do those things? Unfortunately, yes. But that's not who I am, right. And that doesn't get to define me. I get to define me, and right now, because of my sobriety, I've got a lot of opportunities ahead of me. I've got a lot of cool things that I can still do. And the only way I can do those things is if I'm sober. Yeah. And so I've just got to be honest, like you said with, Jason, is that honesty is tough. And it's tough to be honest with yourself. Yeah. Because we know the truth,
right.
and secrets do make you sick. And so I've just got to be honest with everybody, and I don't care. I can work my recovery into the first 3 sentences of every conversation I have and not feel bad about it.
Right.
Good.
The other thing is people already know.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You think they don't, but they know, and they're wondering how you're doing. How's Casey Scott doing? And it's crazy to me that I was one of those guys, Casey, that I was at a, in part of my, not recovery, but in part of my life where I was not drinking. So I call those quit drinking moments, time zones. Or whatever.
I had years. I had 3 months.
Yeah. And so I wasn't really in sobriety and recovery. There's a big difference between those two, and you know that. But I was one of those guys, when you got arrested, I'm like, I was with Shelly and her friends, and I said, see, he's worse than me. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. No, I heard that a lot.
Yeah. I'm like, oh, he's worse than me. Well, he's a public figure. I mean, I don't know how you got through that, to be honest with you, because, that's horrible. I mean, you're blasted across the news. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I mean, and I didn't take that in consideration when I was making my stabs. So I apologize.
No, you're all right, man.
I got to make amends, for everything I do, and that's one. Is I was not your cheerleader. I am now, and you've taught me a different path, and I'm grateful for this show because you've taught me, and it's awesome. It's awesome that you came from ground zero 2 years ago to where you're at now, and I think it's really cool. I think it's really cool that you're proud, and you're one of the ones that taught me that, hey, it's okay to say you're an alcoholic. It's okay. It doesn't define you. It doesn't make you who you're going to be the rest of your life. You know what I mean? You can't change the past, and you wish you could. But if you live in the past, you're never going to get anywhere. You've got to move forward and accept it, and and have gratitude for where you're at today, is what I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. You used the word becoming earlier, which for psychology students is a Carl Rogers term, that we're always in the process of becoming who we should be if we're progressing in life, and until the day you die, you're always becoming. And that's a really healthy way to look at it, because that means no matter what I did yesterday, I can still be in the process of becoming a better version, the best version of myself today and tomorrow. And, I think that attitude is exemplified in the two of you being able to say to people, yeah, I'm an alcoholic, and what that means to me is I'm proud of my recovery and everything I've done moving forward to get sober, and I'm not letting my past define my future. And so that's a nice way to look at it.
But when you look at it, and you just said this, and I just thought it, and it might not even work, but if you break it down, by telling you that I'm an alcoholic, all that means is that I can't drink. It doesn't mean I'm not anything else or all that other stuff, but people go get so hung up on the fact that I can't drink. Mm. But that's it. It just means I can't drink.
Right, but there's a stigma with it.
Yeah, there is a stigma, and that's okay.
Yeah.
And I'll take that stigma, but that's just a small part of who I am.
Oh, sure, yeah.
And people focus so much energy on it. And I was talking to my little brother the other day, and I was like, bro, I fought harder to keep alcohol in my life than I have fought for anything ever. And it's crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, I fought tooth and nail everybody who would say something to keep it in my life. And it was insane. But now I take it out, and that's not who I am. And it wasn't really who I was when I was drinking. I don't know why I had such an attachment to it, but I fought harder for that than I'd fought for anything ever. Mm. And that's sad. Mm-hmm. And now I've got new things to fight for, and I love a good fight. So, Jason, when did it start to get ugly for you?
Well, it got ugly a couple times. This isn't my first rodeo, that's for sure. So after all that, kind of the green light and stuff, and then it became a problem. And I was trying to numb out. I'd lost a business, as she talked about. I never really recovered from that. I thought of myself less.
Did you ever find your truck and trailer?
Yeah, well, they did after I bought a new truck and trailer. So I had two trucks and trailers, which is a whole nother story. But, yeah, I did find it. They found it out in the desert. They thought there was motorcycles in the trailer, but, joke on them. It was just chemical, So, anyway, so I went through, I got back-to-back DUIs in 2012, back-to-back. I was going through a divorce. I was miserable. didn't love myself. And, so I knew at the time, I was like, I got to get help. Like, let's try this thing. I've heard of this, let's try a rehab. And I did. I went into inpatient rehab for 45 days. Came out a better man. Got my wife back. Got my family back. Started getting a good job. Everything was going great. I was about 10, 11 months sober. No, not drinking. I should say that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when I realized, or I noticed that somebody who I went to rehab with, who was now, I don't know how much I can say because I don't want to throw out his name, but he started drinking again. And I didn't know. And so I was like, and then all of a sudden I was driving one of his cars and saw a bottle come out of the back or underneath the seat. Mm. I thought, bugger, he's drinking again. Well, he seems okay. Maybe it's okay now, and
you learn some things in rehab. You know your triggers. I call it a test drive. And a lot of people that I went through recovery with, I've never taken a test drive, but a lot of them do. They try to go out one more time, or they try to use the information they learned in recovery.
Maybe it'll be different this time.
Right.
So basically they go, well, I've got a plan. Uh-huh. I've been there. I know not what to do now.
Right.
I'm going to be better this time.
Yep. Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm going to be a better alcoholic this time.
Yeah.
So I remember that, and there was some left in that bottle, and I drank it, and then it just kind of, then I would hide it for a long time. I'd just secretly drink when I was out of town, like I always did, or I'd sneak it late at night when everybody's in bed. It was just a closet thing, until Shelly started smelling it again. And I started gaslighting, saying, hey, you're crazy. I'm not going to ever drink again. And, I went as far, and we laugh about this now, but I went this far. I worked in lubrication business, dealing with oils and grease and gases and diesel fuel and stuff like that. And I used to work in the warehouse. I was a sales rep for him, but I used to go help him in the warehouse all the time to try to get him up to speed and stuff like that. So I was in the warehouse or whatever, but I had been drinking, and it was during the day, and it was in the afternoon. We never do that as alcoholics. No.
Yeah, right.
So it was during the day, and I'm like, oh, crap, as soon as I get home, Shelly's going to know. Or no, she was picking me up because I don't think I was driving. And so she came and picked me up, and I'm like, she's going to pick me up and smell this, and I'm going to be in trouble. So I dumped diesel fuel all over me.
Oh.
Dumped it. You call it gasoline. I call it diesel fuel lighting. So I dumped this diesel fuel all over me so to cover up the smell.
The working man's cologne.
Uh-huh. And just said I've been working the warehouse. And I'm like, I spilled it on me, blah, blah, blah. But she still knew. You know what I mean? And here I am thinking I'm getting away with this, and she just didn't say anything because she didn't want to cause confrontation.
Why the fight?
Right.
I could call my ex-wife, and she could hear it in my voice. And I've told this story before on this podcast, that my girlfriend Leslie and my daughter Frankie, when I was in rehab, they go, oh, Dad. And I go, what? And they go, it's good to hear your voice.
Yeah. They know.
They could know. She was, Leslie, my girlfriend, she goes, it just always sounded like you had marbles in your mouth. I thought that's how you talked. And I was like, well, we should probably talk about that. But my youngest daughter, Frankie, she was like, oh.
Yeah.
And
they know instantly.
Yeah.
Shelly would know. I mean, I would take a sip and she would know. I don't know, it was weird. And she'd call me and be like, you're drinking. I'd be like, no, I'm not, and you just make up all the excuses.
So she talks about a time that she comes to pick up your kids.
Yeah.
And your car's getting towed away.
Yeah.
Was that your last DUI?
No. That was my second. So that was the back-to-back. Oh, that was my first. That was the first. Because I got them like a June and then a September in 2012. So that's 2012 that we're talking about. But yeah, that was ugly. I mean, I had my boys and their friends at my house. We went to the movies. I was sneaking it in the trunk. I mean, I look back at it now, outside looking in, and just going, you know what? I mean, I could have caused so many things that night.
Mm-hmm.
And the best thing that could have happened to me was getting pulled over and, you know, getting put in the slammer or whatever you want to call it, the drunk tank, because I could have hurt those kids. And that's a scary thought to me, you know, because I would never want to hurt those kids. And, yeah, so she went and picked up our kids at my house, was driving them back, and they saw my car being towed. I mean, what a scary feeling for my kids, you know. And I think you talked about this on your Tuesday podcast and stuff like that. You know, we don't really know what our kids went through, and we never ask them permission for the things we're doing, but we should. I try to get to my two boys and talk with them and say, hey, you know, what are you feeling? You know, do you need to go through anything? You need therapy. You know, your dad put you through a lot. You know, your dad and mom's marriage put you through a lot. Things like that, the back and forth, you know, between the relationship of, is he here? You know, am I staying? Am I not? Am I, you know, just what goes along with alcohol. And, you know, that's traumatizing for a child. I mean, they're older now. They're 20 and 24 and the grown-ups. But, you know, I think they're angry. I think there's still a little bit of anger there at me.
Justified.
And it's justified. And it's okay. You know, I have a great relationship with them now, and they love me, and I love them, and, you know, we talk all the time. But I think there's some underlining, you know, anger that is still there, or underlining trust issues that I still have to build. I mean, this is a marathon, man. This is not a sprint. I can't fix this overnight. You know, this is something I've got to fix for the rest of my life.
Well, and that's one of the, you know, like going back to things we've talked about previously, that's one of the reasons that family members, especially children, should consider working in therapy, working in group therapy, individual therapy, getting an opportunity to express that anger, to process it, to talk about it. For them to feel okay about talking to you about it, because, you know, like you said, if the relationship feels really good right now, sometimes those adult boys, because guys, we're the worst at talking about our feelings anyway.
Right.
They may not want to bring up those things and talk about them. Then they're just stuck with that pressure inside. So, you know, over time, even when things are good, or maybe especially when things are good, it's a great time to go in and talk with a therapist, either as a family or individually,
right,
and to keep processing those things. So that it can eventually be something that doesn't, you know, cause tension inside of a person. But, I mean, obviously you've done and are doing the things you can do to help, you know, rebuild that trusting, loving relationship with them. And then they need to do their part as well to free themselves from that feeling of anger.
Right. And it's hard. You know, the hardest thing for me was I knew I hurt them, because and we were buds. We're best buds, me and my boys. And we've done everything together. I mean, you know, between sports, working out, going hours and hours on end at the baseball field, basketball courts, you name it, we've done it. I've coached it, whatever. You know, and to see there was a point where they finally just had to block me. And this is towards the end of things, how it got so bad. They finally just had to say, they had to put up their boundaries and say, you know, this isn't okay, Dad. Like, I'm not okay with this. I don't want to see you this way. You know, you're unhappy. You're not healthy. And I want my healthy dad back. And that's what they told me.
Setting that boundary.
They had to set that boundary.
So let's get to it. What brought you 8 months ago to recovery?
So I'd lost everything again. So I'd built this whole thing back up. 8 years it took me. You know, close to 8 years, 7, 8 years. And I was still trying to keep that image of everything's okay. You know, putting out, you know, we got plenty of money. I've got a good job. You know, so on paper and the way everybody perceived it, everything's great. You know, and I'm trying to stuff this alcohol thing back from 2012, you know, down the pipe. That's not part of me. You know, I'm not an alcoholic. I wasn't willing to admit it. You know, that was just a blip in the road. It's not a disease. It's just something I can overcome. Well, I was lying to myself.
You tried to outthink it.
I tried to outthink it. Yeah. And I've heard you talk about that. You try to. And you can't. You never will. It's the same vicious cycle, and the ending is always the same. The outcome is always going to be the same. I don't care how long it takes. It could take a month. It could take 10 years. The outcome,
it's going to be a train wreck.
It's going to be a train wreck, and it causes destruction. So when it finally came to a tipping point for me, this is after my second divorce to Shelly. We've been divorced twice now. I was in Arizona, and I got to Arizona because I was trying to run from it. And it was more money. I would justify it saying, okay, I'm going to go make more money. I can just keep doing this facade of everything's okay.
Part of you is probably trying to prove it to your family that, like, hey, I'm going to go down to Arizona and I'm not going to have the stigma. I'm not going to have all these bad things. I'm going to get it all back. And then I don't know you that well, but you were hoping there's going to be a phone call. You were going to go, hey, by the way, I'm in Arizona. I'm doing wonderful. Everything's cool.
Right.
Come out here.
Right.
You were hoping to make that phone call.
Yes. And the first day I got there, I went and got a bottle of vodka, and it was Skid Road from there. And especially in Arizona, you can go to the Safeway or grocery store, and it's right there. You can buy one, get one free. It's horrible. You know, they should put a law on that down there.
No BOGOs on alcohol.
That's interesting, yeah.
So anyway, so that, you know, and I was depressed. I'd lost my wife again.
Your kids set boundaries.
Kids set boundaries. Now I'm back in Utah. I came back because I'm like, I'm going to kill myself here, you know, because I have nobody to be accountable to. Like,
you lost the job down there, is that right?
Yeah, well, I quit.
You quit, okay.
But I knew it was inevitable because of the situation I was in. I was drinking every day. I was drinking every night. I was self-medicating to the point of you get the shakes, and you had to have a little alcohol in the morning just to get the shakes away. And it's awful. It's work. It's hard work. It's horrible work. It's something you never want to experience because you're sick. And so I came home. I came back to Utah and dried up or quit drinking for a month or two or whatever, and went out and hung out with some friends, and I actually had a social drinks, but drank again, and then the cycle just started over. So it came to a head when I was sitting in my apartment. I'm in Centerville, Utah, and I've lost everything again. I've lost my job, lost in my mind, lost my children, my wife, even my siblings, my family, who I love very much. I mean, they're the best supporters. I have a great support group. I lost all that, and they weren't going to reach out to me. You know, they're not going to reach out to me because you can only help yourself. And they knew that. Because if they went and got me and tried to save me, they're enabling me. And I knew that because I had been to rehab, you know, an inpatient rehab. But
now you're in that worst nightmare, like you mentioned in the hotel. You're isolated and you're alone, and you know nobody's going to reach out to you.
Exactly. So I finally, and I was so sick physically. I couldn't drink enough to stay unsick, and and when I wouldn't drink, I was still sick. So I was to that point, physically too, mentally, emotionally. And I remember that morning I went into the bathroom, threw up, and there was nothing there. It was just the bile of my stomach. And I remember wiping my face, and I just looked in the mirror, and I looked right at my face, and I just said, "Are you finally," and I said another word, "worth it? Are you, Jason Bush, worth it? This is for you now. This isn't for anybody else. This isn't to save a marriage. This isn't to save your children. This isn't to save a job. This is you. And do you love yourself enough to get better?" And at that point, I knew. I was like, yeah, I do. Because I'm either going to die or I'm going to end up in jail or prison or one or the other. All three come. You know, it's institutions, hospitals, or, you know, death. And right then and there I decided, and I called my dad, and I just said, "Dad." He goes, "Yeah." He goes, I go, "I'm ready. It's time." And he says, "I'll be right there." And he came and got me. And, it was hard. It's painful. Anxiety's through the roof. My, getting dried up or whatever you want to call it. It was hard. I had gone that bad to where my body was physically shaking for 2-3 weeks straight, coming off it. And I went to the hospital. I went to detox and stuff like that to get off it. And then I, without any legal thing or anything like that, I just said, I'm not going inpatient because I know what that's like, and it was like jail to me. I learned a lot, but I knew I needed intensive therapy, so I went to intensive outpatient therapy, and I stayed in. I've stayed in this whole time. I just graduated, but I could have graduated 3 months ago, but I keep choosing to stay in because I want to be in recovery. But yeah, that's what it came to a head for me, and I have to love myself enough to want to do this. I got to do it for me, and not for anybody else. And then people can love you again. Then people can trust you again because they see it. The biggest apology you can give to a person, because you say sorry way too many times.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest apology you can give another human being or those you love is a happy, healthy person, and they see you. That's all they want. That's all loved ones want. That's all family wants, is to see you happy, healthy, and in the hindsight of things, that's it. That period.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want to see you sick. They don't want to see you hurting. And so, anyway,
that shows how real and genuine your apologies are when you really take care of the person that you need to take care of. Like so many people have said on this show, if a person puts their sobriety above everything else, then that honesty and good treatment that they're giving themselves with their sobriety allows them to have those loving relationships and be successful in other areas of life.
Yeah. They want to see change.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest apology you can get. Words mean nothing. It's the actions.
And I think your actions speak volume, and I'm sure your sons are happy. I still see Shelly at the gym, and I said, "Hey, your ex-husband's coming in." She goes, "You're gonna like him. He's a good guy," And I think that speaks volumes, know. And when she came in and told her story, she told her side of it, but she was never mean. No, and it's obviously she loves you.
Yeah.
And I think
she's a good human, and I love her, and it's hard. I mean, I don't know what I would do if I was in her shoes and had to live with an alcoholic for that long. You know what I mean? I mean, that's hell on.
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
That's hell. That's hell on them.
Oh, yeah.
It just, yeah. And so, yeah, we have, we're friends, and it's good. And I just want to keep progressing. I just want to keep being in the present. All I can change is today.
Well, I love the fact that you came in today and you told your story. And when I said at the beginning this could be really bad or really good, I'm going to tell you it's really good. And I think you're going to help a lot of people by sharing your story. And thank you for the kind words you said about me. I'm just trying to figure it out too. I mean, I'm only 14 months ahead of you in sobriety, and I'm still learning daily and trying to figure it out. And that's what this podcast is about, Dr. Matt, is together we can conquer anything, but it takes you to make the decision.
Yeah, it really does. That connection really is the opposite of addiction. And I'm so grateful to be part of this because we're building a community of people who are understanding, sharing, supporting each other. Most of the people in this community won't actually meet face to face, but it's so fun for Casey and I to be able to meet so many of them, including you, Jason. And, we really appreciate you coming on the show and being so open and honest.
Well, thanks for having me. And I'm grateful. I am. I've got my heart's full of gratitude, and I'm grateful for you guys. I'm grateful for my family members, my siblings, and my kids, and even my ex-wife. I really am. I'm grateful.
That one hurt, huh?
No. Yeah. No, and honestly, I wouldn't be where I'm at without all of them.
Yep.
They're the greatest supporters. Even my in-laws. I miss them. That's the hardest part about divorce is I miss my in-laws. Some of them were my best friends, and
yeah,
I miss those relationships. And so,
Give it time.
yeah.
Hey, thank you for stopping by today. You're listening to Project Recovery, a podcast about addiction. More importantly, it's about recovery. It's brought to you by our friends at useonlyasdirected.org. They got a 3-part solution for the opioid epidemic: speak out, opt out, and of course, throw out. Project Recovery is a KSL podcast.
The contents of this program are for informational purposes only. The program is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician, licensed therapist, or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay in seeking it because of something you've heard on this program. KSL does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the program. Reliance on any information provided on the program is solely at your own risk.
I'm Dave Cawley, investigative journalist and host of the podcast Cold. Don't miss Cold's new Season 3, where I look into the unsolved disappearance of Cherie Warren, a woman last seen leaving her job at a Salt Lake City office in 1985. Police cast suspicion on Cherie's estranged husband and boyfriend, but never made any arrests or recovered Cherie's remains. Find Cold Season 3, The Search for Cherie, anywhere you get your podcasts.